What's going on? This is JM Banks Urban Alchemy Podcast. Hope everybody is doing great out there today. I am back at it. This is episode 2 of Lovecraft Country, Whitey's on the Moon. Crazy title, I know. I thought the same thing when I heard it, and they will explain that a little bit later. But it's another great episode. I was so thankful that they did not drop the ball and just lose any kind of momentum or steam off that first episode, which I enjoyed so much. So let's get into it. The episode opens up with our main characters dancing to "Moving On Up," Jefferson's theme. Pretty much the international Negroes themes for "We Made It" and "We Got Up Out the Hood." But it was a fun scene just to watch both of them having such a good time. It's definitely a shift in tone as opposed to how we left things on the last episode with them escaping the woods and making it to the big manor house and seeing that silver car that helped him out earlier and flip, the hillbilly pickup truck that was chasing them. But it's really, really different. And you're just like, oh, they kicking it. Who knows? If I was a black person back in the 1950s, if I woke up in a mansion, I probably would indulge myself as well. And you have George and Letty who just living it up. Letty has this huge wardrobe with these dresses that she's just obsessed with, and George has this huge library with all of his books that he loves. And that's how you get to these two people, and it's very suspicious that they just so happen to know these are the things that are gonna have these people over the moon about being there at that house. But yeah, you pretty much go into that, and you see Atticus. He's not having a good time because he still remembers the previous night, and he's not buying any of this. The other two, they are just having the time of their life, and as soon as they step out of there, Atticus is like, "Yo, something is up." And we definitely need to stay on our toes, but it's also a beautiful house. And I mean, the last recording that the house is CGI, but just the design and layout of the architecture, I can tell the design team knew what they were going for. And it's just beautiful with all the multiple columns and the domes, the big dome in the middle surrounded with the domes on the columns. And it's that light reddish tannish brick. And I really love the look of the house. The inside is decked out, just one of those old manor houses. And great place. I can understand if you woke up in that place, how you might just lose yourself for a second, regardless of how you may have ended up there. Atticus straight away sees these are distractions just to purely keep them content, keep them happy. If you're happy, you're not going to have complaints. That's They were giving them these little distractions to keep them occupied, like a lot of times in life we get these little things that we just fill our time with, out of leisure and enjoyment, and not looking at the bigger picture. But Atticus, who definitely remembers what's going on, they'll point to that a little bit later on why exactly he remembers and the other two don't. He knows straight away we got to be on our toes. We get more of William, who we were introduced to in the last scene of the last episode, and he's just super creepy. Everything from his look and his demeanor and the way he talks, very cordial, very hospitable, very respectable. However, just the way he does everything is you can't trust this guy no matter how nice he's being. It's very, very reminiscent of how he is in the books as well. Super Aryan look about everybody, including Samuel, but you can tell that the actor who plays him is has a much darker tone of hair color, so it doesn't look as super natural like the other two. Well, I believe both are European, so that probably has something to do with it as well. But it's just a really weird look. It's very reminiscent, and you definitely remember this is exactly what Hitler thought the perfect people look like. So for them to be the ones who are potentially related to Atticus is very interesting. It's through our introduction with William that he gives a bit of a history lesson in regards to the uh, Arden House, or I'm sorry, I don't remember if they actually have a name for it, or if they just called it Arden, or Braithwaite Manor or whatnot. We get the tour from William, who gives us the exposition that Titus Braithwaite, great ancestor and distant cousin of Samuel Braithwaite and Christina Braithwaite, that he was actually the patriarch of the Braithwaite family, and he was a businessman who acquired his wealth through shipping slaves. And I love that scene because Letitia was very quick to point out whenever anybody mentioned shipping back in that time, back in that context, it's slaves. It's kind of code language that folks use to cover up things they don't want to talk about. But it's just a nice scene to kind of show you exactly who this guy is, and he was a slave owner, and it shows because there's an offhand comment made by William about him being notoriously kind to his slaves, which pops up a little bit later with George, a revelation he has later. You have William who points out a picture of Titus Braithwaite, and I was getting a very heavy Aleister Crowley feels to this guy. And if anybody knows who doesn't know who Aleister Crowley is, he was a man in England who was really big with pushing forward the like Church of Satan and the occult and all this other weird sorcery, witchcraft, rituals and orgies and whatnot. But that those were the heavy feels I was getting off of Titus Braithwaite in his robes, pointed caps, kind of reminiscent of clan robes actually, which is interesting because the clan robes are reminiscent of the old Latin, I believe Latin Orthodox priest robes, and everything is connected in some slight way and just changes the meaning over the years, depending on who using the symbology behind it. It's a nice little bit of information. You learn that Titus Braithwaite was also involved in the occult, fancied himself a sorcerer, and in the process of trying to conduct some sort of ritual, the original manor house burnt down. I believe it was a lodge for this secret society that Titus was the founder of. Pretty much lets you know that there's a missing chunk of history, that everybody perished. And when William was slyly says, well, not everybody, he's alluding to the fact that maybe somebody might have made it away. And that leads into the lunch scene where Atticus discovers that the two flat out don't remember anything about the night before. They're cognizant that they don't have any memories of what went on, before they made it to the mansion, but they have no clue what, about the monsters attacking them, or the, sheriff turning into one of the monsters after he was attacked, Letty bursting through the wall with the car. All of that is gone. Only Atticus remembers. At that point, Atticus is just trying to explain it without sounding crazy, and it doesn't go over too well. And I love the way they kind of addressed the issue of mental health with war vets, with PTSD, and it was really interesting to see them play around with that and think he might just be shell shocked, when in all actuality he's the one who knows what's going on in the story, which is another great hallmark of the horror genre. Is I know something's going on and the rest of the world thinks I'm crazy. Horror sci-fi genre, I should say. But there was a really great part. I love the drop where he told him I shot the sheriff, and Letty straight up said, you shot the sheriff. And it was just a funny drop that came out of nowhere, and I laughed my ass off when it rolled up. It's the scene where you just realize George realizes that they're being watched, and despite the raised voice confrontation they're having between each other, George is like, sit down, shut up, we'll talk about this later. Which leads us to the village, which is this little creepy small town that I guess just lives off the support of that old manor house. They end up going there and they're talking, and they're having another talk about Atticus possibly being shell shocked, which leads us to him hearing the whistle and freaking out because it's the same whistle that called off the monsters from attacking them. And it leads us to this racist dog woman. Really reminded me of the racist guy from Django Unchained with the dogs, Mr. Stone Cipher, who you couldn't understand a word out of his mouth. But she was just a flat out racist from beginning to end. making a comment when they made a comment in regards to the animal attacks, and them saying it might be a grizzly bear. She was quick to correct them and say it was a black bear, because the black bears are smarter, but just smart for an animal. And she's, really just making reference to black people in general. Trying to be very slick, I guess, but I guess that's how clever you had to be back in those days. But they did notice that the building that she was holding this meat in was stone, or the only stone building with a stone concrete foundation. So George, of course, knew, being the smart guy he is. He's literally the brains of this operation. But Letty's the badass of the group. Atticus is just emotional, and it hasn't helped out yet. He notices that there's that foundation, the concrete foundation. So there's a basement, which is where they believe they're holding Montrose, Atticus's father, George's younger brother. So they knew they're going to have to pretty much infiltrate that eventually to get him out. But it's a good start. I thought it was really dope the way they just solved that mystery right out the bag. So that's going to save them time. While they were walking back to the manor house, it occurs to George that Atticus's mother, I believe her name is Dora, had once told her that there was a story in her family about her great grandmother escaping from the plantation she lived at during a fire. And it all clicked in George's head that somebody did escape from that fire. It was a slave, one of these slaves that Titus was, notoriously kind to, quote unquote. And she had to escape from the fire pregnant, and she is the forebearer of of Atticus, which also makes Titus the forebearer of Atticus. So all those lines kind of connect in that aspect, in that moment. And we don't get any kind of moment to really take that in before they're attacked by these monsters again. And just as quickly as they're attacked, it's called off by that whistle. And then we see Christina Braithwaite ride up on the horse and instantly tell, her goons to take Atticus to her father and take the others to their rooms and keep them there. And upon them being, taken, they realize that their memory has been wiped again. It's almost kind of like the deneuralizer in Men in Black. Like, yeah, as soon as that whistle hits and the monsters get caught off, they lose all memory of it. But it is in the scene with Christina leading Atticus to finally meet Samuel Braithwaite, which is an interesting introduction to his character, because you see a man laying on a table screaming, as he's getting cut into, and having an organ removed by this man standing above him in these dark robes, very reminiscent of what Titus Braithwaite, the ancestor, wore back in the day. Was taking this organ and he's walking, and Atticus is looking at him expecting him to say something, and he just walks right past him. And next thing you know, the guy on the table sits up and starts talking to Atticus. First thing he says to Atticus is, you're darker than I thought you would be," which is just a dick thing to say to somebody. But they're very well on setting up that Samuel doesn't view Atticus as a person or as any kind of equal, even sharing the same magical lineage from the Braithwaite family. He just views him as just an anomaly that just so happened to pop up that he's going to use to his benefit. It's very interesting because it's funny, we do have these familiar relations, these distant familiar relations. I'm on ancestry.com and I did the DNA, so I get to see distant relatives here and there. A lot of them are white, and it's just I wanna research and just see where everybody falls in. And it's crazy because I wonder if they ever go through their distant relatives and come across me and be like, "Who's the black guy?" But I think everybody should do an ancestry test, or get involved with genealogy, because there's so many unanswered questions about missing chunks of history in our community that we do need to actually go out there and do the research and do the footwork ourselves, because nobody's going to do it for us. Just leading into that, Samuel has a scene where he talks to Atticus about this painting, and it's entitled Genesis 2:19. Describes how the naming of all the animals, birds in the sky and beast of the earth, how Adam was assigning places to everything, and he was essentially putting everything in its place. And that's when everything had order in the Garden of Eden. And essentially, this secret society, the Sons of Adam, that Titus Breathwaite was a part of and founded, that studied and worshiped the occult, were pretty much obsessed with re-entering the Garden of Eden. It's very interesting that the daughter Christina pointed out that women, story of Genesis, women were the ones who brought evil into the world, through their weakness, which is also a good way to point out how, men justify women not being capable to do certain things, especially back in the day, or women not being able to be a part of, per se, their secret society. It's a boys' club. But Samuel, like I said earlier, he's a dick. He's very hostile to Atticus. He's very just he's one of those guys who he's talking, but he's doing it just to hear himself, hear the sound of his own voice. While Christina, on the other hand, is very goddamn friendly. I was just like, this is interesting. Why is she, being this friendly to Atticus? What she got in store? Seems to be trying to build some sort of bond or trust between herself and Atticus, which is uh, strange considering she knows exactly why her father has brought Atticus to, Arden, and what he has in store for Atticus. So it's interesting to see that she was, pretty much playing, another a game of her own initially. But it leads to a very good scene where it's an introduction to Christina explaining that magic is real. The reason that the other two don't remember the experiences with the monsters was a spell due to the whistle, and that there are, the car is pretty much enchanted, and that's why it has that force field around it. And she's pretty much breaking it down to him. And I really hate that there was not a line where she just looks at him, says, "You're a wizard, Atticus." And it's actually a funny line he says in that exchange, where it was like, no wonder the Ku Klux Klan's been calling themselves grand wizards all this time. And she's very quick to point out, like, nah, we wouldn't even talk to them. They way too poor for us to associate with them. So very quick to point out that classism is very prevalent in this secret society, as well as racism, which is funny. Then after that, it's a weird, very weird scene of Christina delivering a baby monster, and the baby monster is being delivered from a cow. So you think a calf is coming out of this cow, but no, it's one of these monster creatures, and yeah, it's just a weird scene. It's very Lovecraftian. It fits the context of the narrative. So I don't even know what to say about that stuff, because they were trying to make it seem like it was very sweet and wholesome, and I don't know if they were just trying to make a point about how these townspeople who are openly hostile to three black people are not only housing and raising monsters, but caring about them and enjoying in the circle of life. But when it comes to black people, they're utterly disgusted. Maybe that's the underlying context of it all. But that's just me grasping at straws there. After that, we get back to the mansion and see this fantasy nightmare sequence where it starts off with, we see everybody's points of view. Letty is talking to Atticus, but then you're pretty much shown that Atticus, the real Atticus, is doing some investigating in his room, looking for clues. And George is, he found a secret passageway to this secret compartment, or room, I should say, that looks like maybe a library or a studying area. And in that area, he found this book, was kind of like bylaws for the secret society, the Sons of Adam. During that point, Letty and fake Atticus, they start talking, and she kind of reveals that her mother was, what they call back in the day, a good time girl, where she would meet guys and stay out all night with them instead of raising her kids, and pretty much left Letty alone. And that kind of gives a little bit more context why Letty didn't necessarily feel beholden to come back to her mother's funeral after her death. But after that, her and fake Atticus start getting physical and kissing, and as that's happening, Atticus is attacked in his room by his fantasy of this woman from Korea who was actually the same woman from the first episode who was in the dream sequence as the Red Princess from Mars. But yeah, it's a really brutal fight, and literally trying to not hurt this woman, but she's trying to kill him. And then the third dream sequence is George, oddly enough, seeing Atticus's mother, Dora. And that's the first indication that you see there might be a little bit more than meets the eye between George and Atticus's mother, oddly enough. That being the wife of his younger brother. And as the scene go on, definitely you see that becomes the case when they start dancing and reminiscing. And you get the information that George and Montrose are both from Tulsa, and they were kids during the Tulsa massacres and escaped, with their lives. And it's really just, you really get the feeling exactly what's going on here. There was definitely some sort of flame between Dora and George, and they're dancing, and they just look like they're deeply in love. And I couldn't imagine what that must be like, living relatively close with your, a woman that you love, but your brother happens to be married to her and, be the father of her child. And meanwhile, you have your own wife that you love, and I'm sure that's some very conflicting feelings. And it really sets it up to a different dynamic with how you view him as an uncle. But it's, and then Letty starts getting attacked by fake Atticus, and then we see some more wonky CGI with this snake popping out of his pants, and it's reminiscent of a painting of Adam raping Eve, and the snake it looks like his penis. That really just took me out the scene. I feel like if anything you could have done, you didn't even have to do anything like that with that snake. It could have just very well been the image of Atticus trying to attack or rape Letty. That was scary enough. Just like that woman popping out of nowhere, the Korean woman popping out of nowhere trying to kill Atticus. That took me aback. Suppose George is the only person of that scenario who got off a little easy, and didn't have to experience anything too crazy. What I got from it, I was telling Eric about this on the last podcast episode, is I think it was something in regards to the temptations. Maybe it goes back to the whole Garden of Eden narrative with the snake. And giving in to temptations, because I think there's a secret behind each of those narratives. You have Letty, who's opening up about her mother, and how her mother would bring these men to the home to sleep with, and it's just a revolving door of men. And then the next thing you know, she's making out with Atticus, and it's getting hot and heavy before he starts, trying to attack her. So it's a correlation between what you want and then the thing kind of turning itself in on you. And maybe that's with Atticus, because it kind of, in the first episode, like I was telling Eric, the voice on the phone when Atticus makes that long distance call to Korea, that's the same actress who's the Red Princess, and who's the actress that attacked him in the dream sequence, or the fantasy sequence. So we know that there was definitely something. He even says after they came out of it that he did something bad. Something is definitely going on with that. I'm not sure. They haven't really given too much information on Atticus's relationship with that woman. Besides, they have one, obviously, and of course the dynamic between George and his brother's wife. That's something that obviously you might love this woman, but you definitely can't have her if she's married to your brother. So it's really messed up scene, and it's revealed that the members of the Sons of Adam are just watching from, I don't know if it's a secret passage, but pretty much from looking through the walls at them as they're experiencing these horrible visions, entertained by it. And it's a fucked up scene, because they're, just using this magic to torment them pretty much, and show them who's the boss in this situation. Next thing that happens, it leads us into the dinner scene. Samuel opens up the dinner scene, explaining about sacrifice and Adam giving up his rib to create Eve, and he also is going to give up something to himself. And pretty much has that organ that was removed in the introduction scene for him, fried up and served Hannibal style to the other members of the order. And as he's given his speech, he's cut off. And once again, Courtney B. Vance gives one of those great scenes where he's just commanding the scene in all aspects, and he just pretty much takes over completely. Lets them know, hey, I'm here. We don't know why we're here, but and then he lets them know he knows a little bit more than they may expect he knows, because he located that rule book for the sons of Adam. So he pretty much lets them know, hey, you guys are a part of this special club. But it looks like you guys have an actual rule that anybody who's a direct descendant, a direct blood descendant of Titus Breathwaite, he's not only just automatically a member of the club, he's a special member of the club. So with Atticus, he has a theory that Atticus is in fact the last living direct descendant of Titus Breathwaite through his great great grandmother who escaped as a slave, that he's one of these senior members, and he has the authority to give orders to the lesser members, the ordinary members. And so Atticus stands up and tells them all they got to get the fuck out, everybody but Samuel. And after this happens, he orders Samuel as a that one of those senior members to give him his father back. And Samuel pretty much lets him know, like, I only believe in this BS as much as those people believe they listen to me because of it. He lets him know that it doesn't really matter what's written in the book or the rules, because he has real power. And I really love that read between the lines. Like, so for so long, rich white men have used the law or have used the Bible to justify and control. But at the end of the day, they're not beholden to it. You can say you're not supposed to steal and murder, but we got a country that's built off theft and murder. You can say that the Bible says all this stuff, but there's a lot of biblical leaders in the Bible who did a lot of sketchy stuff in the name of God. There's a lot of religious leaders, popes, kings who did a lot of horrible things in the name of God, and they weren't necessarily following the rules in the book. So I enjoyed that scene and the context in that scene. Really thought that was dope. Like they Atticus thought he was about to just wrap everything up real quick there, and Samuel was like, nah, bro, don't work that way. But after that, we pretty much learned that because Atticus is the last living descendant, direct descendant of Titus Breathwaite, that they plan on using him as a sacrifice, kind of in the way the ritual killed Titus originally in that fire that ended up burning down the original lodge for the order. They planned on using it, except for willingly giving his life this time through his descendant. That way they can open up the Garden of Eden, and they can pretty much restore balance to the earth by bringing order and putting everything back in its place. Which is an interesting concept for a end goal of a secret society. After that, we flash to the village. We're back in the little village, and they infiltrate that little stone. The stone holding, the cell they believe is a prison, and the dog lady catches them, gets knocked out by Letty. They discover the downstairs basement area, and to their surprise, Montrose is not there. And when they start to look around, it occurs to George, Montrose's favorite book is The Count of Monte Cristo, and that is pretty much centered around a prison break. Wrongfully jailed inmate, it pretty much makes his grand escape. Desmond Dante, that's his name. So that was Montrose's favorite book. So he actually dug his way to freedom, Shawshank Redemption style, which was dope. And it was a really funny scene, a scene I really liked because they managed to get some more Nina Simone in again with Blackbird, which I love. Great song if you're not familiar with it. But anyways, he's digging himself out, and as soon as he gets through with all of his hard digging, he turns around and they just standing there like, "Hey, Montrose." And then you get to see really observe his and Atticus's toxic relationship, and him and like, why would you come here? And he's like, I'm here to save you. And he's just so ungrateful. So you really from the jump see that these two are at each other's necks. It's not a good thing if you're trying to get out of a horrible situation. But I do love as they're trying to make their way and make a getaway. Montrose drops the Necronomicon name drop, the Book of the Dead, and George corrects him that this specific cult, which is trying to learn from the Book of Names, and I love the way they address that, the fact that there are many cults around the world, and each of them go off different books of spells, and this specific group is reading from the Book of Names, so they can try to get to Eden. But just as all that is going on, the car smashes into a invisible force field. Another spell as they start to cross the bridge, and then everything picks up dramatically. You see, Letty gets shot by Samuel first, and then George gets shot by Samuel, and then you just automatically cut to Atticus being cleaned of the blood, Letty's blood off of him, and getting ready for the ritual. And Christina lets him know he will heal George, his uncle, if he goes through with it. And he already healed Letty to prove that I can heal this stuff. So do what I say, or everybody dies, pretty much. So he agrees to go through with it, and as everything's getting set up, all the members are in their full cult regalia and surrounding, and it's a beautiful sequence because this is when they bring in the Gil-Scot Heron track, Whitey's on the Moon, and as they're doing that, everybody's getting in position, and you see this beautiful electric effect that's kind of reminiscent of more of a science fiction Frankenstein type laboratory feel to it. And Atticus is in the middle of this triangle, and lightning starts hitting him as Gil-Scot Heron's giving this poem about how we managed to put people on the moon, but the common man in America was going through struggles finding food and employment, and but somehow we have the capabilities to put someone on the moon, but we don't have the capabilities to solve hunger or capabilities to make sure everybody has a job. But it's a great sequence once again, just like the way they did the James Baldwin driving montage in the first episode. Super dope. I love what they're doing artistically with this. But yeah, pretty much as the ritual's going on, and it's like a portal is opening, and it starts to turn into greenery as the portal's open, and you see this dark, shadowy substance start to kind of go through Atticus's arm. As that's happening, Atticus is seeing through the portal that it's his ancestor. I believe her name was Anna, who was the slave who escaped pregnant the night of that initial fire. You see her running through, or pretty much trying to make her escape, and I believe that was signifying the way they were using old magic or old sorcery to open the Garden of Eden, and they wanted to utilize the Breathwhite blood to open that portal and do this magic, and they didn't count on the ancestral magic of the African blood of coming through. Why would you? What would you know of spirit of the ancestors coming back to guide you through the way, which is a lot of African cultures believe in, they don't believe in one or many specific gods. They believe in the ancestors. And that was a really great scene showing that there, an ancestor in that exact same situation where she was like, follow me, pretty much it was a vision of her escape from the burning house as the ritual goes awry, and everybody starts getting hit with the lightning and turning to dust, and Samuel gets turned to stone, and Montrose and George and Letty, they getting out of there. Oh yeah, and before that happens, we get the information that George may possibly be Atticus's father, which is crazy. It did not even occur to me, even when they hinted that maybe George and Atticus's mother might have had a relationship. It didn't even occur to me that George may be the father, and that it makes sense, because that's one of the reasons that Montrose is probably so hostile to Atticus, is because he's might be raising his brother's son. And Atticus is a lot like George in there, very similar. But that could also just be a byproduct of Montrose being such an asshole that it kind of pushed him to be more like the man he wanted to be like, who wasn't his father. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy in that respect. That was crazy, and Montrose knew too. Like he was like, "Hey, I don't care if you got a bullet in you. We ain't never. We said we're never going to talk about that." And he was letting them know, like, this might be or my last leg. So you need to make sure you're doing right by your son, and make sure you're all he has pretty much now. And it was just crazy that they just hit you with that, and it's like, damn, just damn. But something I did notice from the scene where Atticus's ancestors guiding him through the house, as they get to the door, I noticed she was carrying a black book, and it looked like it was kind of a leathery black book. And anybody who knows about the Lovecraft mythos knows that might be very well be the Necronomicon, the Book of the Dead, which I believe pops up in the Cthulhu mythos or whatnot. But yeah, that might be the Book of the Dead that she stole. So that's interesting to know. Interesting to see if that actually pops up in future episodes. But the episode caps off with the heartbreaking death of George. And I gotta say, Journey Smollett and the actor who plays Atticus Freeman, they give great performances. I mean, Michael K. White it's just very solemn, in shock, holding his brother's dead body. But Journey Smollett and that actor, they give very genuine performances, and especially the actor who plays Atticus. I've been very critical of that particular character. I really hadn't up until that point seen too many scenes where I'm like, okay, this actor is showing me something. But that scene was like, okay, because it's very super hard to pull off genuine grief if you're not a good actor. But both of them, just their facial expressions, just the jerk reactions they were having to the situation, I loved. I mean, I did not love watching it because George was my favorite character of this entire show in these first two episodes. So it was heartbreaking. It really helped set up the stakes, so to speak. Atticus could have probably went forward and just let the ritual, take hold and sacrificed himself. They probably still would have killed his uncle. So he chose to make the decision to probably do the thing that saved the other people, because he probably wasn't too sure if he would make it out, but he knew he was going to probably save Letty and his father. But it's just heartbreaking that George is dead. I was expecting Christina to pop up and heal him, but she didn't. And they really don't make any reference to what happened to Christina and William. But yeah, that's the way it ends, and it is just heartbreaking. I really can't remember the song that was playing, but that just added to it. And just a soul crushing scene. But once again, I'm in love with this show. I think it might be my show of the year for 2020, like Watchmen was for 2019. So hopefully they continue on this path. Hopefully the episodes continue just to blow my mind like they've been doing. So yeah, if you guys have been watching and you guys are enjoying hearing me talk about that, please let me know by liking these videos, by watching the videos, by subscribing to our YouTube channel. We'll be putting these reviews exclusively on our YouTube page to try to navigate some traffic there and try to get people more in the habit of going there for our content as well, because we're going to start putting stuff on there more. As soon as we get our actual video capability up, we'll be putting out more actual videos of us. But as it is, we're just going to put these audio tracks on the YouTube so you folks can enjoy. So don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, share, and just do what you can to support this outlet if you can. Once again, I'm J.M. Banks, Urban Alchemy Podcast. Please stay on the lookout for episode 3 of Lovecraft Country. And thank you all for joining me once again.